Okay, here we are again. I'm joined by my dear friend Katie, who's generously agreed to help me with these dialogues. And today's dialogue and today's therapeutic approach is Jungian therapy. In each of the videos, we have the same client with the same presenting issue, struggling to ask their boss for time off. And then we look at how 20 or more different therapeutic approaches would work with this client. And today it's especially exciting because Katie has some experience with Jungian therapy. So, Katie, tell us a bit about yourself and what you know and how come about Jungian therapy.
Yes, so I'm Katie. I'm from Minnesota. So if you're here to learn or practice your English, you can really hear a Minnesota accent or English spoken that way. I stumbled upon Jung sort of accidentally. I started seeing a therapist in 2020, and he, uses Jung a lot in his therapeutic approach, and it just was a really great fit for me. It approached it from a way that sort of incorporated, I feel like, everything, like myth, you know, my family of origin, my ancestors. We're able to involve my faith, which is important to me in this too. So I loved like the way that it sort of held everything. And it never stops. Like there is no, oh, you've arrived, you've graduated. It's a lifelong endeavor, which I also really, really appreciate. And yeah, I've started listening to this Jungian Life podcast, which I want to just throw out there.
Mhm. We'll
If,
mention it.
yeah, if this exchange is interesting to you, I would recommend it for anybody who wants to know more about Jung without having to read like volumes and volumes of books and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you. And yeah, I suppose all these new modalities and therapies are kind of spin-offs of the big of Jungian and psychoanalytic and person-centered and the big, I don't know, four or five. But let's see what's specific about Jungian therapy. We're gonna read a bit. Maybe we'll take turns with the theoretical stuff, reading it out, and then we'll look at a dialogue. Now, the dialogue is written by ChatGPT to illustrate what a session might look like. So take it with a pinch of salt. As I always say, it might not be how it works in exact detail, but it gives you some idea about what you could expect. So we'll take turns. You can start with the first paragraph. Is that okay? Of the
Okay.
intro.
Yes. In Jungian psychotherapy, a client's struggle to ask for time off would likely be explored through the lens of unconscious material, complexes, and archetypes. The therapist would look beyond the immediate issue to uncover deeper patterns that are influencing the client's behavior.
So the first key feature, exploration of complexes and archetypes. The therapist might explore whether the client is caught in a complex, possibly related to feelings of guilt, inadequacy, or fear of disappointing authority figures. These emotional patterns often develop early in life, especially in relationships with parents or caregivers. In this case, the boss could be viewed as an authority figure, perhaps carrying associations with the father archetype or another figure tied to power and control. The act of asking for time off might symbolize something more significant, such as the client's difficulty in setting boundaries, prioritizing self care, or confronting feelings of unworthiness.
Individuation and shadow work. Jungian therapy could also frame the client's struggle as part of their individuation process, the journey toward becoming their true self. The therapist might explore whether the client's difficulty in asking for time off stems from a disowned part of themselves, such as the need for rest and self-compassion, which has been relegated to the unconscious, the shadow. The client may have projected certain fears or insecurities onto the boss, making the interaction seem more daunting.
Hmm. So again, we're looking at different parts and projections. Symbolism and active imagination is the next key feature. Jungian therapists would likely encourage the client to explore the symbolic meaning of asking for time off. This could represent a struggle with self worth or an inner conflict between work and rest. The therapist might guide the client through active imagination, a technique where they engage with inner figures, an inner boss or child, to explore the dynamic and resolve the unconscious tension. Now, would you like to read the role of a therapist this time?
Sure. I would love to
Nice.
wear that hat for one. In the reverse, yeah. Yeah, I'm
And
so used to being the client. I mean, in real life, not in just
mhm.
these simulations, but in real life, yeah.
Well, I think it's much more comfortable being the therapist. It's less kind of revealing, although it's just role play. I'll
Yeah,
be
that's
fine.
fun. It's fun.
So the
Yep.
client starts and says, I've been thinking about asking for time off, but every time I'm about to do it, I stop myself. I feel guilty, like I shouldn't be asking for it.
That feeling of guilt, can you tell me more about it? What thoughts or images come to mind when you imagine asking for time off?
I see myself in my boss's office, and it's like I'm a child asking for something I don't deserve. I'm afraid he'll think I'm lazy or uncommitted.
It sounds as though your boss has taken on the role of an authority figure in your inner world. Does this remind you of any earlier experiences? Perhaps when you felt afraid to ask for something you needed?
Actually, yes. My mother was always working hard, and I felt like I couldn't ask for her attention. I didn't want to burden her, so I learned to keep my needs to myself.
You've carried that pattern into your adult life. Your boss now represents that authority figure, and the guilt you feel about asking for time off might be tied to that childhood experience of withholding your needs. In Jungian terms, we might see this as a mother complex, a psychological pattern rooted in your early relationship with your mother, now being triggered by your work situation.
That makes sense. I feel like I always need to prove myself by working hard and not asking for anything.
Let's explore what it would feel like to confront this internalized authority figure. I invite you to close your eyes and imagine standing in front of your boss, or perhaps it's your mother. You're asking for time off, and what happens?
I see my boss, but he looks like my mother. I'm standing there trying to speak, but I feel small.
Okay, stay with that image. What would you want to say in this moment if you allowed yourself to express your need for rest?
I tell her, I've worked hard and I need a break. I deserve to rest.
And how does she respond?
She seems softer now, more understanding. She's telling me it's okay to rest, that I've earned it.
Notice how that feels in your body. This figure, this version of your mother, is part of your shadow, representing the nurturing, compassionate side that you've disowned. By bringing it into consciousness, you can begin to claim that self compassion for yourself. How does it feel now to imagine asking your boss for time off?
It feels less intimidating. I think part of me still feels nervous, but I also feel stronger, like I have a right to ask for it.
This is a significant step in your individuation process. By facing this inner conflict and integrating the part of you that needs rest and self care, you're becoming more whole. The next time you think about asking for time off, you may find that it's not just about the conversation with your boss. It's about reclaiming your worth and giving yourself permission to meet your needs.
Okay, that was the dialogue. What what do you think? I have a sense that that amount of psychoeducation explaining is perhaps it's not how it's not that realistic, or am I wrong? And it's a bit directive, but I guess this is a simulation, almost like of many different sessions squashed into one. Is that?
I think that's right. I feel like this is like at least 2 years worth or something, or
Yeah.
like maybe for me it would be like 2 years worth.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yes, yeah. It's really good though. It's interesting because I think you talked about this too in the intro, the parts and how it relates to a video we did about internal family systems, and I'm just sort of like reflecting on that because I feel like parts and we talked about like the archetype of the mother in here, just how like sort of core that is to
Mm.
therapy. Yeah, it's in a lot of these, and I think I guess I do appreciate that about Jung, is that I think he sort of brings that into our awareness through so many different little avenues and facets, including symbols and imaginative work and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think this would, yeah. And I feel like, at least, I don't know. I only have seen one therapist who likes Jung, but just how these little things come about in a conversation about something maybe totally unrelated too. We might be talking about a fight we had with our spouse, and that can sort of reveal stuff about us, and dreams
Mm.
as well, I think are pretty powerful.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
How it
this,
happens in the mundane things, maybe, but yeah, or so-called mundane. They're not actually mundane, but
yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as you were saying about the core, it's almost like all the core is there, and then these spin-offs, as I say, they kind of zoom in on one aspect, for example, working with parts or working with the imagination. And I suppose in today's world, and medicated care, I think it's called, or managed care, where you have to prove that something is effective, you have to almost like take a small part of it that can easily be researched and proven to be effective. I mean, that's a long story, but I do feel like when you really analyze Jung or some of these mm, older therapeutic approaches, you'll find a lot of the elements that are in new therapies. Yeah, and this moment when there's this psychoeducation, like this is what is happening, and the client says, "Yeah, that makes sense." Usually, the client would probably not accept that connection for a
Yeah,
long, long time. I mean, it's
absolutely.
worth sometimes maybe saying it, but I know from the position of a client as well as a therapist, these things take a lot of time. But still, the dialogue is helpful for us to learn some of the language and see
Yeah.
how it, in an ideal world, it would play out. But if
Mhm.
you are a Jungian therapist, please comment and give us some more insight into what you think about this. And as Katie said, if you're interested, you can follow the podcast. I'll mention it in the captions or whatever this is in the text part of our video. So in this session, the therapist helps the client connect their current struggle with unconscious material, including early relational experiences. Through active imagination, the client begins to integrate these own parts of themselves, leading to a greater self compassion and empowerment. Okay, that's Jungian therapy, and that's ChatGPT's idea of how a session might look. I hope to see you, Katie, in some future videos. And if anybody has any questions or comments, you're welcome to comment below, and we'll look forward to engaging with,
Yes.
with you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you,
All right,
Mina.
we'll stop there. Bye, everybody. Bye, Katie.
Bye-bye.